Hey guys, September 25th, 2025, here with your after hours recap. We will try to keep this short and sweet. It looked like some money was rotating into the energy space. You do have your XLE, which is looking like your highest close in this formation, really, since the lows. That's very nice to see. You are starting to establish yourself above the 200. You do have several stocks within that group that are acting well. Even a name like CVX, which, this isn't like, some crappy run-of-the-mill company. This is starting, again, to establish itself above the 200. Exactly what you want to see if you are bullish. Oil, refining, oil and gas, whatever you might want to call it. So that is good. We do have some stocks that are acting well. CVI was another one that kind of came across my radar today. And again, new 52-week, it looks like closing high, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, that is correct. New 52-week closing high. Very, very awesome to see. Just a super move. So CVI is starting to turn the corner, and we've got a lot of these, and nobody is really talking about them. I feel like I'm constantly bringing them up, and kind of here you go. These things are acting well. So it's nice to see, and they're doing it really without crude oil. They're just doing it as a group, and the ETF XLE looks great. So that is a sector that I'm just kind of waiting on a few of these setups to tighten up for me, and I don't see why these things can't be in a renewed uptrend as your 200-day begins to turn up. The Chinese equities today, BABA continues to act fantastic. XPEV today I thought was acting really, really well right at the open. Just a huge pickup in volume. Obviously, maybe not the best close. These names tend to be a little bit choppy, but nice to see XPEV hanging in there. FUTU reclaimed the 50 simple moving average a few days ago. Still looks really good. So, you've got some names in that Chinese space that are acting well. Obviously, BIDU, BILI, PDD, TME, they still look fine. So, it just feels like maybe some money is still left to go into China. Maybe as setups tighten up and then you get an entry to get yourself involved in these, maybe it's a good place to consider going forward. And again, it was just kind of a little bit of a split day with the mega caps. Apple acting well, Microsoft not so much, Meta not so much, Tesla, and then NVIDIA, kind of came right back. And with that, a lot of the semiconductors, they were acting actually pretty well today. And we are coming off of 3 days of a sell-off. You get kind of that violent little gap down overnight. A lot of stocks were violently gapping down overnight. Speaking of violent gap downs, Oklo, look no further. When something gets very, very extended, which Oklo was, all of a sudden, I'm going to sleep and this thing's at 131 bucks. I'm looking at my screens this morning and this thing's at 105, and I'm like, holy what a washout. So very, very difficult, to make sure that you always want to make sure that you're peeling some of that into the strength, so that you can potentially hold a nasty move down like that. But ultimately, that was just kind of the market, right? You get some of these like extended or these growth names, right? Whether it be an A-Lab past few days, just straight down, and you've got all these little subtle gaps in there. Subtle gap down, lower, subtle gap down, lower, subtle gap down, lower. Exactly from the close to the open, close to the open, close to the open, subtle gap down. And then finally, today, still a red day, even though it's, trying to be bought up off of this, effectively this breakout level. You're dealing with a potential little sneaky entry today, but I didn't really get myself involved into that. I don't love massive volatility. I prefer to see a higher low be built, and then I can get involved and look for my low risk entry. But yeah, tons of volatility in a name like this, in a name like BE, in a name like Reddit, and then even really some of the names that I shorted yesterday. I got short iron, and I kind of held it overnight, and it was a bit of a pain in the ass last night, even though I couldn't do anything about it. This morning it's washing out, and then sure enough, right at the open, it's squeezing back up, and I'm like, the cat with 9 lives. This thing's got 9 freaking lives. It closed well enough today that it allows me to hold it again overnight. We'll see what happens. I'm not going to get stubborn with this thing. Effectively, 50 bucks is where I know I am wrong. IONQ, and you had a few of these quantum stocks. IONQ was a whole lot weaker today than, let's say, a Rigetti. And Rigetti is like, that should make you a little bit uncomfortable if you're short this name. They're just not going away. You don't know when they can kind of fall off a cliff, but you got to be careful if they're just not going away. SNDK, one of these that was breaking down yesterday with MU on their earnings, and then this one followed through to the downside. Absolutely no headache with it, and that's exactly how I would like my shorts to act if I'm going to go ahead and take a short, or better still, MSTR, which I shorted a handful of days ago, up at the 200 simple moving average, and then just an absolute washout today. Nice to see. I did not cover any sub 300. I think this thing is in no man's land and can potentially go lower. And more importantly than that, Bitcoin is acting very poor underneath the 50 simple moving average, effectively lost it, consolidated, went lower. And let's look no further than Ethereum as well, everybody's second favorite cryptocurrency, maybe even their favorite now according to positioning. You lost the 50 simple moving average on a pickup in volume. It's good to remember when you look at positioning, it's a crowded long. So did it get a little less crowded after today? I would probably suspect so. You got everybody piled in on the long side. There's not many people left to buy. And so when you start to lose your 50 and you realize, hey, there's probably a lot of buyers between that $4,000 and $4,800 level. Well, guess what? You start to lose that, that $4,200 level. There starts to be a lot of people who are recent buyers who are now in the red, who don't really want to take a big loss, so they got to exit. And that's why positioning can be very helpful. It's why I've avoided Ethereum for the most part. In particular, recently, has everything to do with positioning, not anything to do with technicals. I tried buying this thing on 9/12 on Friday. On Monday, this gapped down on me, and I owned ETHU. So I went from a nice green trade to a slight red trade, and I was just like, I don't see another setup on this thing. I've left it alone, and that has turned out to be the right idea. So the market is just in kind of one of those choppy modes. You had some names go absolutely berserk today. LEU was nuts. Congratulations to you holders of LEU. I thought it was perfect down by this 208 area. I know some guys in the room are still holding this. Boy, congratulations for being patient off this open and then letting this thing kind of come back for you. I owned MP on no news whatsoever. This thing started ripping. At one point it was up 14%. I did take some off the table myself, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere around this $78 range. I've been owning it since $64, so nice to have gotten paid on it. Now I can just really let it work a whole lot more comfortably. And then CCJ, in my opinion, one of the nuclear leaders. You get this gap down into the 20-day, gets picked up all day long. That's very nice. What it goes on to do from here, I don't know, but all I know is today's lows is my definite firm line in the sand. And ideally the 50 simple catches up to that in a few days, and I can just use the 50. But, really Chinese equities continue to act well. There are some of the speculative names that continue to act fairly decent. Again, and for every iron out there, you also had a cipher. So, don't just get too cocky that you can own these names that are wildly extended, because out of nowhere, these things can, completely crumble down 17.5% in a day on 154 million shares traded, which is by far the biggest, of this entire move. Not saying that the move is over. I'm just saying that it's likely this thing ends up needing a whole lot more digestion. So, kind of bear that in mind when you're, playing some of these names. Once you start to get extended from the 50, it can get ugly. Again, look at Oklo. Look at what they did to Cypher today. If you're just happy because you own iron and it's going higher, don't make sure you're paying yourself into some of that strength. I am personally short it, as I thought, these would make better trades. I've got my firm line in the sand where I definitely know I am wrong. So that's just kind of my thinking here. And again, for every strength that you see in Rigetti, you've got a little bit of weakness in IONQ today. So, for every group, there's going to be your ones that hold up best, the ones that want to continue squeezing a little bit more, and then the ones that can completely crumble like this cipher. So just kind of good to take note of that. Otherwise, I didn't see a ton where, anything else really going on in the market. I already mentioned the energy stocks. I think they're continuing to act well. And again, we looked at XLE, CVI. Again, I think that this thing looks awesome. It's the highest close really in well over a year. So This is nice to see. They're just quietly trending. They're just quietly upticking. Mega caps today were fairly split. And Chinese equities still feel like they're leading. The cryptos feel like they're kind of getting their ass kicked right now. So it's just kind of the environment you're in. It's like its breadth seems to be narrowing. If all you're really missing is the data center names coming down and the quantum stocks coming down and the nuclear stocks coming down, and there's not a whole lot left in the market. And not to mention these three groups that I just mentioned, they have already made very massive moves. Can they keep going? 100% they can. Everything else, some semiconductors, whether you're talking about an ALAB, probably needs a new base. A BE probably needs a new base. And then again, half of the mega caps look like, not much, right? Like Amazon looks kind of like shit. So it's just good to kind of take into account everything that you're seeing and just continue to try and take it one day at a time. I don't think things are entirely broken, right? Things can turn around fairly quickly in the market. So I continue to be optimistic. I did get stopped out of a few positions today. So something like Rocket Lab, I did get knocked out of this morning. I did take my Oklo off the table. I did get out of CCL yesterday. And I also got out of SYM. So this is the other one that I wanted to kind of cover. And this is just how quickly risk can happen, right? You're sitting in there a few days, you get a really nice push. I did a nice job trimming some into the strength. All of a sudden, you're being patient, for day two, and then all of a sudden in the morning, it's like, okay, I got to get the hell out of here. And I ended up taking like a small 30-cent loss on the last of my shares, which is never fun. We'll see if these things end up setting up again, but just a little too much volatility out here for my liking. For me to continue and plow into a bunch of brand new positions without me seeing volatility dry up a little bit, seeing if the market can kind of get through this seasonally weak period, and then we can find ourselves in some strong stocks that are trying to go up that aren't extended. So ideally some base building here from the prior leaders. I think that's very nice. Maybe a TEM can still go higher. Just needs a little bit of a cleaner base. Maybe an ALAB could still go higher. Again, Reddit, I think could still go higher, but maybe just some cleaner bases. Energy names, again, I continue to reiterate, those look really good. Chinese equities, I think those still look really good and aren't necessarily on the super extended side. You could just look at a FUTU yesterday with the beautiful, beautiful reclaim of the 50 simple moving average. I thought that was an awesome potential entry, and we even talked about it during pre-market prep. So nice to see these things work. It's probable that if the U.S. stocks take a breather for a little bit, money can continue to flow into the Chinese equities. I even know that Kathy was a buyer of BABA and BIDU, if I'm not mistaken. So that's always cool to see. It seems like the hedge fund managers are positioning themselves, as you can tell by price, into some of these Chinese equities, and definitely by the volume that has been coming into these names over the recent weeks. So hopefully this video finds you guys well, and I will see you guys bright and early for tomorrow morning. I'll be off the desk early tomorrow, flying out to Michigan to play some golf this weekend. So I will see you guys then as well, back on the desk on Monday if I don't see you tomorrow. Cheers.